there's been researchers and scientists in Gabon that have noticed that chimpanzees usually take the same exact route no matter what with their group when they're trying to travel from point A to point B. But lately, there have been chimpanzees that have been sick, most likely with parasites, and they end up taking different routes. And those different routes have different plants, they have different vegetation, just different things in general. And when we tie that back to the Gabonese culture, there is a lot of natural medicine and natural remedies that are used to treat people's ailments and illnesses. And one of the things that the scientists have found is that the fecal samples before the chimpanzees deviate to somewhere that's not on their usual route, the fecal samples have more parasites in them than the ones that deviated towards different sorts of vegetation. And it probably is because they found some sort of natural remedy. So, some of the things, and one of the things that I feel like would be really cool to do, hopefully, an upcoming research project, is to see if we can find the fecal samples and then analyze the fecal samples and identify the actual plant DNA within those samples to be able to see what natural remedies are out there that the chimpanzees are using. And I'm sure this happens. I'd be down to put money on it that this actually does happen, but proving it in a scientific way definitely is, I feel like, going to be difficult. And I also don't think that chimpanzees are the only animals that do that. Nonetheless, it seems like it would be very, very cool to do. Like, insanely cool to do. And hopefully, the uptick of ecotourism within the country allows for more things like this to get started. Different research projects, different science projects, especially ones that are non invasive to the animals. It would make a lot of sense for different camera traps to be set up, for different fecal analysis to be ran, just to be able to understand the wildlife even more and be able to understand the impact that humans are having on the nature while the country as a whole is trying to incorporate more ecotourism into it. Because if we're benefiting from nature through being able to generate money based off of it, there is a level of protection that I believe nature should have in us giving back to nature. And that's because when people think about chimpanzees, I think a lot of us picture dense rainforests, thick canopies, vines all over everywhere for them to sing from, and that's it. But being here in Gabon genuinely reshaped how I think about where chimps live and how their survival is tied to the land as a whole, not just one ecosystem or like one isolated area. Because Gabon is a rainforest, it's a savannah, there are wetlands, rivers, coastlines, all layered on top of each other. And the wild part is how quickly those transitions happen. You can be standing in tall grass in the savannah, walk a little bit, and suddenly you're under a closed canopy with completely different sounds, humidity, and life around you. And the chimpanzees out there move through absolutely all of that. Like their lives aren't combined or confined to one postcard version of nature. They really depend on the overlap of all these different climates, essentially. And that overlap matters a ton. They rely on fruiting trees that come and go seasonally, and those trees don't all exist in one place year round. So they gotta move, they gotta forage, they gotta adapt. And when you protect large connected landscapes like this, instead of just having isolated pockets of protection, you give them the flexibility to do that naturally. And that's one of the biggest things that Gabon gets right. The land isn't just chopped up into tiny fragments. There's space for these buffaloes to move, there's space for the chimpanzees to thrive, and space for wild animals to be truly wild. And that space changes the behavior. You see it in how the chimps socialize, how they feed, and how even all the animals respond to humans. In areas where the land is heavily fragmented, chimpanzees are forced into closer contact with people, farms, and roads, and that's where the conflict starts. That's where disease transmission becomes more likely. That's where the stress gets increased. But here, because the ecosystems are still intact, they aren't constantly being pushed into survival mode. They're allowed to exist on their own terms. And the savannah, even though it isn't full of trees, does play a role in that too. It's a part of the entire ecosystem too. Certain foods, certain insects, and certain travel corridors that are safe for them exist there. And chimpanzees will move along the forest edges, cross open areas strategically, and use different habitats at different times because they all have different purposes. And that adaptability is one of their like biggest strengths. But it's only possible if their environment still gives them options. And what really continues to hit me over and over again is realizing how intentional Gabon has been about practicing the whole picture. Not just animals, but also the land and water too. When you hear that a huge protection of the country is protected, it sounds very impressive on paper, but when you're actually there, driving through it, walking through it, hearing it, feeling it, you understand what that protection actually translates into. Like being able to hear all the birds, you see less fear in animals. You just feel like you're in a place that hasn't been completely bent around by human convenience. Whether it's medically, behaviorally, or socially, all that all that matters on every single level. And when it comes to the veterinary conservation side of everything, being able to treat parasites and run blood work is, of course, interesting. But another big thing is the stress levels, the nutrition, whether the chimps can move naturally through their environments or if they're just going to be boxed in over and over again. But the rainforest that you're seeing and the savannah that you're seeing come together to be able to create a balance that supports all of it that they like. But there is a human side of it too. Like conservation doesn't exist in a vacuum. People live here, people rely on the land. There are people that live exclusively in the rainforest. And Gabon seems to recognize that long term protection only works if all the ecosystems stay functional and they're not just blocked off. When the land stays healthy, the animals are healthier, which leads to less disease transmission to humans, and people have more options that don't rely on just tearing down the habitats and destroying all the land at the end of the day. So, as I was standing in these ecosystems and thinking about chimpanzees specifically, it made me realize that we got to maintain our relationships between the forest and savannah, but also between us and animals, the animals in the land, and even just human to human, country to country. Because if one of us ends up falling short, everybody ends up feeling it. And that's why I believe chimps are such a powerful lens for understanding this place. They're super intelligent, social, adaptable, and deeply connected to the environment, and they reflect the health of the system that they live in. If the chimps are thriving, it usually means that the land is doing something right. So, regardless of how fragile it is strong at the end of the day. Gabon to me feels like a reminder of what's possible when ecosystems are respected early on and not just we're fighting to repair them later. And for chimpanzees, that difference could mean everything.